Do you ever sit in a room full of people and feel like you're the only one not in on the joke? That's how it felt that night. A round wooden table, too many forks, a flickering candle someone lit for ambiance, and her brother talking about hedge funds like he invented them. I sat there chewing dry lamb chops, nodding at people I barely knew anymore. I used to think family dinners were supposed to feel warm, but this one felt like a staged photo. Posed, smiling, fake. My name's Emery. I'm not loud, I'm not funny, I'm not much, if I'm being honest. I work in IT support at a mid-sized company where people only remember my name when their passwords stop working. I married Kay 15 years ago because she was electric. She had that laugh that lit up rooms, and I guess I was just grateful someone like her noticed someone like me. I always told myself she was out of my league. When people joked about it, even our wedding photographer, I laughed with them because it was easier than wondering why she stayed with me, why she picked me in the first place. I made peace with being the quiet guy in the corner, the coat holder, the one who drove her home from her parties while she giggled on the phone with her friends. But that dinner, it changed everything. Her parents had just moved to a bigger house, some retirement dream with a 2-tiered deck and a wine fridge built into the wall. Kay wanted me to see it, said we needed to show up for family more. I thought that meant she was trying to reconnect with me, with our roots. I was wrong. It was a perfectly rehearsed dinner. Her mom in pearls, her dad in a salmon-colored sweater, her cousin's new fiancé with his hand permanently glued to her shoulder like a trophy, and Kay in that emerald dress she never wore around me anymore. I brought flowers. Nobody cared. They poured wine like it was water, and soon the table buzzed with stories. Vacations, promotions, new cars, someone's son making the honor roll. I smiled when I was supposed to, laughed on cue, waited for her to reach for my hand like she used to. But under the soft clink of silverware and the low hum of polite conversation, I realized I was only there to fill a seat. Her family's dining room smelled like money and lemon polish. Every chair had a cushion, every wine glass matched. The plates looked like they belonged in a magazine, not under greasy roast and overcooked vegetables. Across from me, Kay laughed too hard at her father's jokes, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard aimed in my direction for years. Her hand touched his arm like a child showing affection. But I saw the performance in it, the need to be admired even here. I cut my meat silently, counting the number of times no one looked at me. 5, maybe 6. Her brother Chase was droning on about renovating a lake house, something about cedar beams and imported stone. Her mother nodded like royalty, and Kay, she looked like she belonged here with them, not with me. No one asked about my job. No one asked about our kids. No one asked anything. And then it happened. Her sister Reagan asked a harmless question. "So, how's married life treating you guys after all these years?" And Kay didn't miss a beat. She set her fork down with a light clink, sipped her wine, and looked directly at Reagan with a glint I hadn't seen since college. She said, "He's dependable like an old appliance. Not fun, but it gets the job done." The table chuckled. Her mom even dabbed her lips with a napkin to hide a smile. I froze. The air left my lungs like a slow leak. I don't even think anyone noticed the way my hand trembled next to the water glass. Kay didn't look at me. No one did. I hadn't spoken in 20 minutes, and now I couldn't speak at all. So I stood up. No dramatic scraping of the chair, no slammed fists. I just stood, slowly, like I was waking up from something. I looked around that polished, smiling table of people who hadn't asked me a single real question all night. And I left. I walked out the door and didn't hear a single voice call after me. 15 years, 2 kids, a shared life, undone by one sentence. I walked until my legs ached, down the street, past the mailbox with her dad's name printed in gold, past the neighbor's fence where we once picked pumpkins for the kids, past everything that used to mean something. I didn't take the car, didn't take my phone. I just walked. That sentence repeated in my head like a drumbeat. Not fun, but it gets the job done. I kept hearing the way her voice danced on the edge of cruelty. Not loud, not obvious, not enough to start a scene, but sharp enough to wound me in front of a dozen smiling faces. And no one flinched. No one said, "Kay, what the hell?" Not even her sister, who used to call me the best thing that ever happened to her. I ended up in a diner off 9th and Callahan, the kind with vinyl booths and a cracked dessert display that hadn't changed in 10 years. The waitress didn't even blink when I asked for coffee at 10:30 at night. She just poured and walked away. And there I sat, a man who'd built his life around being useful, dependable, the human version of an appliance, apparently. I thought about the years. God, the years. Like how I took night shifts to cover Kay's grad school tuition when she wanted to get her second degree, or how I moved halfway across the country just because she got an offer in Denver. I never once asked her to compromise. I thought that was love. Giving her everything she asked for and trusting that one day she'd look at me with the same fire I saw in her eyes 15 years ago. But she didn't. Lately, she barely looked at me at all. You know the kind of silence that doesn't mean peace, but distance? That's what our bedroom had become. A cold war. No fights, no passion, just 2 people breathing in opposite directions. I don't even remember the last time she reached for me. I remember the first time, though. God, I remember that like a scar. It was raining. We were both 22. She was wearing a Nirvana t-shirt and no makeup, and she leaned into me during a movie we weren't even watching. That night, she told me she felt safe with me, that no guy had ever made her feel like she didn't have to perform. Now here we are. I guess the act never stopped. It just evolved, got quieter, subtler, uglier. I texted her from the diner, just a simple, "I left. I need space." No reply. Not then, not even the next morning. I waited. I checked my phone so many times I thought I'd crack the screen just by looking at it. Nothing. It's strange how silence from someone you live with can feel louder than anything they've ever screamed at you. That night, the second night, I slept in my car. And on the third day, I drove back to the house. My own house, our house. But when I walked in, it didn't feel like mine anymore. The living room was spotless. A candle burned on the shelf, but there was no note, no sign that she'd missed me. Her purse was by the door, which meant she was home. So I walked upstairs, my heart pounding like I'd broken into someone else's life. She was folding laundry, calm, hair tied up, not a single wrinkle on her expression. "You left," she said, like she was reading a headline. "Yeah," I whispered, voice cracking. Over a joke that broke me more than anything else. Because it wasn't a joke to me. It was years of emotional erosion boiled down into one careless sentence in front of the people who were supposed to be my family, too. I said, "Do you even care that I walked out?" She paused, then tilted her head. "I mean, I figured you'd cool off. You always do." That's when I realized she didn't just say I was an appliance. She truly believed it. To her, I was predictable, harmless, a man too tired to fight, too scared to leave, and too desperate to be loved to ever do anything drastic. But this time, I felt something different. I felt gone, and I hadn't even packed a bag yet. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't demand explanations or scream about how long I'd been quietly unraveling under the weight of our so-called marriage. I stood in that hallway, watching my wife fold our clothes like I hadn't just disappeared for 2 days, like she didn't say what she said, like I wasn't a human being at all. "You always do," she'd said. "And you know what the worst part is?" She was right, because that's what I'd always done. Every insult, every subtle jab she dressed up as sarcasm, I swallowed them like they were vitamins for a stronger relationship. I let her interrupt me, talk over me, roll her eyes at me. I let her walk out of rooms mid-conversation, shrug off the things that hurt me, invalidate the feelings I barely managed to express. And every time, I cooled off. I convinced myself I was being sensitive, that I was lucky to have her at all. This time, though, I couldn't go back to that version of myself, the man who accepted crumbs and called it dinner. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to speak, but the words got tangled in my throat. She stood across from me, arms crossed, waiting for me to grovel, to apologize for being dramatic. Instead, I asked, "Is that really how you see me?" She didn't answer immediately. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, exhaled, and finally said, "I didn't mean it like that. You're just, you're dependable, Emery. You're safe. You don't rock the boat. It's not a bad thing. I mean, come on," people laughed. It was harmless. Safe. That word stuck with me. Not loved, not admired, not respected, just safe. Like a seatbelt, like a security system. Something you keep around for function, not affection. I think a part of me died right then. Not dramatically. It was quieter than that. Like when a pilot light goes out and everything still looks fine, until it's not. Later that night, she asked if I wanted tea. Tea. After emotionally gutting me, she offered me chamomile. I said no. She shrugged and went downstairs. I sat in that room, staring at the same ceiling we'd made love under 100 times, and felt like a stranger in my own home. I thought about leaving again, but I didn't. I stayed. I brushed my teeth. I lay down on my side of the bed. And for hours, I listened to the sound of her breathing next to me, peaceful, unaffected. Meanwhile, I was drowning in thoughts I couldn't shut off. I thought about the night she forgot our anniversary 2 years ago and blamed work stress. I thought about the time she snapped at me in front of Paige when I burned the toast and said, "Of course you'd screw up something simple." I thought about how she always made me feel like the embarrassing husband in front of her friends, always rolling her eyes, always correcting me, always reminding people that she married down. And I thought about what Reagan, her sister, told me 6 months ago when we bumped into each other alone at the grocery store. Sometimes I wonder why you're still with her. You're too soft for this family, Emery. I had laughed nervously, but now I wasn't laughing anymore. That next morning, Kay kissed the kids on the forehead, grabbed her purse, and said she was heading to yoga. She didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't bring up what happened, didn't even say goodbye to me. I watched her drive away through the blinds, like I was watching the end of a movie where the villain walks off untouched. And maybe that's when the switch finally flipped inside me. Not because she left, but because I realized I didn't miss her when she did. I didn't ache for her. I didn't want to chase after her like I always used to. all I felt was peace. A confusing, terrifying, overdue peace. It wasn't strength, not yet. But it was the beginning of something I hadn't felt in a long time. The permission to finally ask myself, what the hell am I still doing here? I didn't leave the house that day, not physically, but my mind was gone, drifting somewhere between confusion and a truth I didn't want to admit. I sat on the couch for hours, Milo curled at my feet, the kids upstairs arguing about cereal, and I just stared at the wall like it might offer some kind of revelation. You don't realize how much you've lost yourself until you start asking questions like, what do I actually like doing? Or, when was the last time I laughed and meant it? I couldn't remember. I could tell you Kay's favorite yoga mat brand, the kind of wine she drinks when she's had a stressful week, how she arranges the throw pillows. But I couldn't tell you the last time I felt proud of myself. Around noon, I opened the drawer in the hallway where we kept receipts, phone chargers, and random junk, looking for nothing in particular, just fidgeting. That's when I found it. A folded piece of paper with a printout of a hotel reservation. At first, I thought maybe it was from last year when we took the kids to the coast. But the date on the booking was recent, just 2 weeks ago. 1 night, 1 room, 1 guest name, Kay. And it wasn't in our city. I stared at that paper for a long time. My heart didn't start racing like in the movies. It did something worse. It slowed down, like it was preparing for impact, like it already knew. I didn't confront her right away, not because I was afraid of her answer, but because I already knew what she'd say. It's not what you think. I needed space. I just wanted time alone. Maybe all true, maybe not. But it didn't matter, because it meant she had another life, a life she didn't tell me about, a part of herself I wasn't invited into anymore. And that wasn't new. That had been happening for years. I was just too tired, too resigned, too programmed to notice. That night, she came home smiling, her cheeks pink from the cold, yoga mat tossed in the back seat. She kissed Eli's forehead and ruffled Paige's hair. Then she looked at me like I was part of the furniture. She asked, "Can you take the trash out?" That was it. No hug, no "how are you?" No mention of the dinner, the hotel, the silence. Just take out the trash, like I was a Roomba with a beard. And I did it. I picked up the bags, walked outside, stood by the bins for 5 full minutes, just breathing in the cold night air, trying not to scream into the trees. When I came back inside, Kay was on the couch scrolling her phone. So I sat down across from her and I said, "Who's in Charlotte?" Her eyes flicked up fast, not wide with surprise. More like someone trying to remember which lie they used last. "Charlotte?" I held up the paper. She stared at it, then at me, then back at it. A long pause. Then, "It's not what you think." I nearly laughed. There it was, the script, word for word. She said it was a solo reset weekend, that she just needed time to breathe, that she didn't tell me because she knew I'd make it weird. She even had the audacity to frame it as my fault for being so needy lately. And I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at her like I was watching someone I used to know get swallowed by a version of themselves I couldn't rescue. That night, I lay in bed next to her again, but we didn't speak. I stared at the ceiling while she drifted off like nothing happened. And for the first time, I realized what being truly alone feels like. It's not the absence of people. It's the presence of someone who makes you feel invisible. The worst part wasn't the hotel. It was that I wasn't even surprised. That's when I understood something I'd been too afraid to name until now. I was already out of this marriage, emotionally, spiritually, and maybe she was too. The only difference was she moved on without telling me, and I was still waiting for permission to leave. The morning after the Charlotte reveal, I dropped the kids off at school and sat in the car for 20 minutes without moving. I kept staring at the dashboard like it held answers. I didn't want to go back home. I didn't want to go anywhere. I was afraid that if I went back inside, I'd become the version of myself she expected again. The man who forgets, forgives, and folds in silence. Instead, I drove nowhere specific, just through neighborhoods we used to talk about moving to, past parks we never visited, through roads I didn't recognize. I ended up outside a hardware store, parked in the lot, sipping a coffee that went cold while I stared at couples coming in and out. Some holding hands, others arguing. One guy opened the passenger door for a woman who looked like she hadn't smiled in weeks. I saw myself in him. I saw Kay in her. I went back home after 2 hours. The house was too quiet. Milo greeted me with his usual tail-wagging devotion, the only living creature in that house that still looked at me like I mattered. I sat on the floor with him for almost an hour, just petting him, talking to him like he understood. And I think, in some way, he did. That night, Kay didn't bring it up again. The hotel, the conversation, nothing. She ordered sushi, asked if I wanted spicy tuna. I said no. She shrugged and put on some documentary about mountaineering while she scrolled Instagram. I watched her from across the couch, how perfectly composed she always was, like even her chaos had been choreographed. And then the phone buzzed. She picked it up, smiled briefly, and typed something quickly before locking the screen. Something in me snapped. I said, "Are you seeing someone?" She blinked. Then, instead of looking startled, defensive, or even offended, she looked tired. What kind of question is that? She sighed. The kind you don't want to answer, I said softly. She turned toward me, and finally, she broke eye contact. That was all the answer I needed. But still, she said, "No, I'm not seeing anyone." And yet, her voice was too calm, too polished. It wasn't the denial of someone who wanted to reassure me. It was the line of someone who needed to keep the illusion afloat. I stood up and walked into the kitchen. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a reason to scream, maybe a crack in the walls, maybe something that would feel more real than the numbness sitting behind my ribs. And then I saw it. A box tucked on top of the fridge. We kept old phones in there, broken ones mostly. Kay's old iPhone was inside. I'd seen her toss it in there when she upgraded. I took it down, not even sure what I was doing. Maybe I wanted to torture myself. Maybe I wanted to find nothing and feel stupid so I could believe her again. I charged it. Took 3 tries to guess the passcode. Her birthday, our anniversary, Paige's birthday, nothing worked. Then I tried the date we met. It opened. That hurt more than anything. I didn't even have to dig. The messages were still there, dozens of them. A thread with someone saved as S. They talked like lovers. Not just physical, emotional. The way she used to talk to me when we were young. She sent him photos of her at yoga, of her cute tired face after work, of her hotel view. The worst message. Sometimes I forget what it's like to feel chosen. Then I talk to you. I sat on the floor, the phone glowing in my lap, and something inside me crumbled. Not exploded, just gave way, like a wall eaten away by years of slow water damage. No screaming, no rage, just the collapse. I didn't go confront her, not right away. I didn't delete the messages or throw the phone. I walked out the back door and sat on the steps under the cold sky while Milo curled up next to me. And I cried. The kind of cry that isn't loud, but shakes you from the inside out. My chest tightened, my hands trembled. I felt humiliated and invisible at the same time. Because what she took from me wasn't just love. She took dignity, she took intimacy, she took the narrative of who I thought we were. And worst of all, she didn't even care enough to hide it properly. She wasn't afraid I'd find out because she didn't think I'd do anything if I did. That was the final insult. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed beside Kay, watching the digital clock on the nightstand blink through every minute of darkness. I could hear her soft, rhythmic breathing, the sound of someone entirely at peace. She had no idea what I knew now. No idea that I'd seen the truth laid out in blue iMessage bubbles, one sentence after another, like a timeline of betrayal. And still, I didn't confront her. Not because I was scared, not anymore, but because I realized something I should have accepted a long time ago. Arguing with someone who doesn't respect you is like trying to reason with fire. It doesn't matter what you say, it'll burn the same way. I waited until morning. I made the kids breakfast like I always did. Eggs, toast, banana slices. Kay came into the kitchen with her wet hair wrapped in a towel, kissed Eli on the head, complimented the toast I made like she hadn't gutted me 10 hours ago with her silence. I nodded, smiled faintly, played the part. I dropped the kids off at school, and then I drove straight to a storage facility on the edge of town. I signed a short-term lease for a unit, something small, just enough for a few boxes, clothes, a mattress. The woman at the counter didn't ask questions. She probably saw this kind of thing all the time. The man with tired eyes and no plan. After that, I went to a bank and opened a checking account in just my name. I moved a portion of our joint funds into it, not enough to raise red flags, but enough to give me breathing room. Every action I took that day felt surreal, like I was watching someone else do it. I kept thinking, this isn't me. But maybe it finally was. Maybe this was the version of myself I buried under years of trying to be agreeable, manageable, safe. When I came home that evening, Kay was on a Zoom call in the living room. I heard her laugh, the one she used to reserve for me, now going to someone else in whatever world she escaped to when the house became too boring. I walked straight upstairs and started packing. Slowly, quietly. Not everything, just the essentials. My laptop, some clothes, a few photos of the kids, my childhood books. Not because I planned to run, but because I needed a space that was mine again, a space that didn't smell like her perfume or echo with her judgments. Later, over dinner, I watched her talk about someone from her yoga class and how people who complain all the time just drain energy. I bit my tongue to keep from laughing out loud. The irony was choking me. She never once noticed I was quieter than usual. Or maybe she did and didn't care. When the kids went to bed, she asked if I wanted to watch a show. I said I had emails to finish. She nodded, opened her phone, and disappeared into whatever conversation S was still feeding her. I stood in the hallway and looked at her, not as a wife, not even as someone I loved, but as a stranger who just happened to know where the cereal bowls were. And that's when it hit me. I didn't want to fix it anymore. For years, I wanted her to see me again, to turn back into the woman who cried at our wedding, who squeezed my hand during Paige's first ultrasound, who once sent me surprise lunches at work because she missed my face. I waited so long for her to come back that I didn't realize she left years ago. And worse, she never planned on telling me. Now I was finally seeing her for who she'd become, and I hated that I stayed long enough to watch it happen. I didn't sleep that night either. I stayed in the guest room with Milo, scratching behind his ears while I stared at the blank ceiling. I was making a list in my head. Not a pros and cons list about leaving her. That list had been written in my gut for months. No, this list was about timing. I'd wait for the weekend. I'd make sure the kids weren't around. I'd tell her everything once. No yelling, no theatrics. And then I'd leave. Not as an act of revenge, not to make her feel anything, but simply because I couldn't stay in a home where I'd already become a ghost. I waited until Saturday. Paige had a sleepover at her friend's house. Eli was spending the weekend with my sister. I made sure of that. I wanted them out of the house, out of the blast zone. I didn't want them to hear what I had to say, and I didn't want them to see what it would do to her, if anything. The silence of the house that morning felt like a countdown. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee I didn't drink, staring out the window at the wind moving the trees. She came downstairs in leggings and a hoodie, hair still wet from the shower, scrolling her phone without even glancing at me. I watched her. Watched the way she leaned against the counter, the way she hummed to herself, the way she lived like nothing was broken. I cleared my throat. "We need to talk." She looked up slowly, like I'd interrupted a song she liked. "About what?" she asked. She didn't sit, just crossed her arms and leaned back, like she was already preparing to dismiss whatever I was about to say. I slid the phone across the table, her old one, unlocked, still glowing. She looked at it, didn't touch it, didn't ask what it was, didn't even flinch. I said, "I know." Silence. Then she asked, "How much do you know?" That was her first question. Not, "What are you talking about?" Not, "I'm sorry," just a risk assessment. I took a slow breath. I know about Charlotte. I know about the texts. I know about S. Still nothing. No gasp, no guilt, just a long blink. She finally sat down across from me, her fingers drumming lightly on the table. I waited for her to say something. A lie, a confession, a single drop of regret. But she just asked, "How long have you been going through my things?" My laugh came out dry and bitter. "You cheated on me, and your first instinct is to ask if I invaded your privacy?" She didn't laugh. She didn't argue. Instead, she tilted her head like a therapist and said, "You've been distant for a long time, Emery. This didn't happen out of nowhere." I actually smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what I expected. She'd twist the narrative, reposition the blame. If I was distant, it was because I had spent years yelling into a vacuum, begging her to see me. If I shut down, it was because I had learned that speaking only made her roll her eyes or leave the room. If I became small, it was because that's the only version of me she tolerated. "I know I haven't been perfect," I said quietly. "But I stayed. I showed up. I kept choosing you, even when I didn't recognize who you were becoming." She crossed her legs. "You're not the only one who felt unfulfilled." That's when I stopped talking. There was nothing left to say. Because she wasn't sorry. Not really. Not for cheating, not for lying, not for making me feel like a background character in my own marriage. She was sorry, I found out. She stood and walked to the sink like the conversation was over. like she had a yoga class to catch or a text to answer, like I hadn't just dismantled the illusion we both had been pretending to live inside. And that's when I said it. I'm leaving. She didn't turn around. I continued. I've got a storage unit. I've already started moving my things. I've got a new account. I'm not taking the kids from you. I just can't live like this anymore. She froze for half a second, then turned back to me, finally looking, really looking. And what I saw in her eyes wasn't fear, wasn't grief, wasn't even relief. It was curiosity, like she wasn't sure I had the spine to follow through. You're serious? She said flatly. Yes. A pause. Then she said something I'll never forget. Okay, do what you need to do. Just like that. No fight, no chase, no apology, no please. I stood there in the kitchen as she walked past me and went back upstairs, and I realized the marriage didn't end because of what she did. It ended because of what she didn't do. Didn't fight, didn't care, didn't cry. And that told me everything. I was finally free. And it broke me to know she didn't try to stop me. I left on a Sunday morning, not in a dramatic storm out or under cover of night. I packed my car slowly, methodically. 2 suitcases, a box of books. Milo jumped into the passenger seat like he knew this time. It wasn't just a ride around the block. Kay didn't come downstairs. She knew I was going. I didn't leave a note. Didn't need to. The silence between us had already said everything. I think she believed I'd return after a few days, that I'd crash at a motel, miss the house, the routine, the idea of us. But I didn't, and I wouldn't. The storage unit was small but clean. It had just enough room for a mattress, a folding chair, and my laptop. I slept there for a night before a friend from work, someone I barely knew but who'd heard the exhaustion in my voice, offered me a spare room. I moved in the next day. He didn't ask for explanations, just handed me a key, told me the Wi-Fi password, and said, "There's leftover chili in the fridge." That tiny moment of kindness nearly broke me again, but this time in a good way. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. I started hearing myself again. Not the voice I used to use around Kay, the cautious, filtered one, always walking on eggshells, but my voice. The one I hadn't heard in years. The one that liked dumb documentaries and cooking for no reason. The one that still loved drawing, even if no one ever saw the sketches. I started therapy, real therapy, not a podcast or a self-help quote on Instagram. An actual human being who listened, challenged me, and never once called me safe. I told the kids the truth, gently and age-appropriately. I didn't badmouth their mom. I just said that sometimes adults stop being good together. Paige cried. Eli asked if we were still a family. I told them, yes, just a different kind of family now. One where everyone deserves to feel loved and seen. They adjusted slowly. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. I see them on weekends now. We make pancakes, paint badly, build impossible Lego towers. I let them see me cry once, not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted them to know real strength isn't hiding sadness, it's owning it. As for Kay, she never reached out, not really. A few logistical texts, a cold signature on the separation agreement. No, I miss you. No, I'm sorry. No, what did I do? And I think that's okay. Because healing didn't come from her understanding what she did. It came from me finally accepting that her inability to love me the way I needed wasn't a reflection of my worth. Just a limit of hers. I've started dating again. Nothing serious yet, just conversations over coffee, shared laughter that doesn't come with eye rolls, It's awkward, it's slow, but for the first time in years, I'm not afraid of being alone. I choose myself now. I choose peace over performance. And every morning when I wake up in a quiet room filled with light, I remind myself of this simple truth. Leaving wasn't weakness. It was the first strong thing I'd done in a very